Ambassador Relthora stood in the communications center, her feathers trembling. Outside the reinforced windows, her world burned. Vishara Prime, her home planet, was dying. The Velran people had lived in peace for thousands of years. They had no armies. They had no weapons. And now they had no hope. The Korthax Empire had arrived 3 days ago. Their warships filled the sky like black clouds. Their soldiers walked through Velran cities, killing anyone who resisted. Millions were already dead. The Velran defense fleet, built only for exploration and rescue, had been destroyed in the first hour of fighting. Relthora placed her hand on the communications panel. Her voice was steady even though her heart was breaking. "This is Ambassador Relthora of the Velran people. We are under attack. The Korthax Empire is destroying our world. We have no military force to defend ourselves. We are dying. Please, if anyone can hear this message, we need help. We are begging for help." She broadcast the message across every frequency she knew. Then she waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. Her staff brought her reports. Another city had fallen. Another million civilians were dead. The Korthax were not just conquering. They were enjoying it. Responses began to arrive. The Galactic Council sent their thoughts and prayers. The Draylan Federation expressed deep concern. The Morphean Alliance condemned the violence. But no one sent ships. No one sent soldiers. Everyone had reasons why they could not help. The Korthax Empire was too strong. Fighting them would cost too much. The galaxy would rather watch the Velrans die than risk their own people. Relthora closed her eyes. She had failed her people. There would be no rescue. There would be no miracle. Then a new message appeared on her screen. The origin point made her pause. It came from the Sol Sector, the quarantine zone, the place where humanity lived. Nobody went to the Sol Sector. It had been sealed for 3,000 years. High Counselor Vexithar sat in the council chambers, staring at reports from Vishara Prime. The images were terrible. Cities reduced to ash, bodies filling the streets. The Korthax were thorough in their brutality. Another counselor spoke. "Should we intervene?" Vexthar shook his head. "The Korthax have 300 warships in that system. We would need to commit our entire fleet to have a chance, and even then we might lose, so we do nothing. We do what we always do, we wait. Eventually the Korthax will be satisfied and leave. The Velrans will rebuild, if any survive." Vexthar did not respond. He was watching a different screen. A message had been flagged by their monitoring systems. Someone had responded to the Velran distress call. Someone from the quarantine zone. His blood went cold. No, this cannot be happening. A younger counselor looked at him. "What is it?" "The humans. They are responding to the distress call." Silence filled the chamber. Everyone knew about the quarantine. Everyone knew why it existed. 3,000 years ago, when the galaxy first discovered humanity, they were still fighting among themselves. Human civil wars spread across their solar system. Their weapons were terrible. Their willingness to die was worse. The Council had watched humans destroy their own colonies rather than surrender them. They watched humans continue fighting even when they had no chance of winning. The violence never stopped. It only grew more efficient, so the Council made a decision. They sealed off the Sol system. They told themselves it was for humanity's own good. The humans needed time to evolve, time to become peaceful, time to leave behind their violent nature. 3,000 years had passed. The Council assumed the humans had died out, or become peaceful, or simply forgotten about the rest of the galaxy. Vexthar knew better. He had studied the old records. He knew the truth that most had forgotten. Humanity was not quarantined because they were weak. They were quarantined because they were too dangerous. "What should we do?" someone asked. Vexthar stood slowly. "We pray that the humans have changed. And if they have not changed, we pray that the Korthax learn their lesson quickly." "What lesson?" "That some species should never be provoked." Admiral Daejung reviewed the distress signal for the 3rd time. His command center was quiet. Everyone waited for his decision. The message was clear. A peaceful species was being slaughtered. They needed help. The rest of the galaxy had ignored them. Dr. Bora stood beside him. "We should establish communication first. Learn more about the situation. Perhaps offer diplomatic support." Daejung glanced at her. "Diplomatic support will not stop the Korthax from killing them. Military action could have consequences. We have been isolated for 3,000 years. The galaxy does not know what we have become. Perhaps it is better that way. Daejung was silent for a moment. He looked around his command center. Every console displayed information about human military capabilities. Fleets that had never been tested in real combat. Weapons that had only been used in simulations. Soldiers trained for wars that never came. Humanity had spent 3,000 years alone. Cut off from the galaxy. Forgotten by those who feared them. And in that isolation, they had not become peaceful. They had become prepared. The galaxy ignored us when we needed guidance, Daejung said quietly. They locked us away and hoped we would disappear. Now they ignore these Velrans just as they ignored us. I will not repeat their mistake. He turned to his officers. Prepare the response fleet. 30 ships. Captain Haiwan will command the operation. We leave in 6 hours. Dr. Bora touched his arm. Daejung, are you certain? Once we break the quarantine, there is no going back. I am certain. The galaxy will learn that humanity has returned, and they will learn what 3,000 years of isolation has created. On Vishara Prime, War Master Drukhon walked through the captured capital city. His soldiers had done their work well. The resistance was broken. The civilians were compliant. Soon they would begin extracting resources and shipping them back to the Korthax Empire. This was routine. The Korthax had conquered dozens of worlds. The Velrans were no different from any other prey species. Weak, peaceful, pathetic. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Kralvex, approached. War Master, our sensors have detected a fleet approaching the system. Drukhon barely looked up. How many ships? 30, Drukhon laughed. 30 ships? We have 300. Are they insane? The energy signatures are unusual. We do not recognize the design. It does not matter. Scramble 200 ships. Leave 100 in orbit to maintain control. These fools will learn not to interfere with the Korthax Empire. Kralvex hesitated. Should we perhaps attempt communication first? Drukhon grabbed his subordinate by the throat. Are you questioning my command? These vermin sent a distress call. Someone was foolish enough to answer. We will destroy them as an example. Now go, Kralvex fled. Drukhon watched the tactical display as his fleet moved into position. 30 unknown ships against 200 of the finest warships in the galaxy. This would be over quickly. The human fleet arrived at the edge of the system in perfect formation. 30 warships, each larger than anything the galaxy had built in centuries. The design was functional, brutal, and clearly built for one purpose. Captain Haiwan sat in the command chair of the dreadnought Silent Hammer. Her face showed no emotion as she watched the Korthax fleet approach. 200 enemy ships detected, more in planetary orbit. Acceptable, Haiwan said. Broadcast our message. The communications officer activated the transmission. It went out on every frequency in every known language. This is the United Terran Navy. Your distress call has been received. To all Korthax forces, comply or die. The message was simple, direct, and absolutely sincere. On Vishara Prime, Ambassador Relthora received the transmission. She did not know what the United Terran Navy was. She had never heard of humanity. But they had answered her call. She watched her sensors as the two fleets moved toward each other. The Korthax had numbers. But something about the human ships made her afraid. Not afraid for herself. Afraid for the Korthax. Captain Haiwan watched the Korthax fleet close the distance. They were moving into standard battle formation. They thought this would be a normal fight. She allowed herself the smallest smile. All ships, weapons free. Show them why the galaxy feared us. The human fleet did not move. They simply opened fire. The first human salvo crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds. 200 beams of concentrated energy, moving at speeds the Korthax had never encountered. Mass driver rounds accelerated to 30% of light speed. Missile swarms, guided by artificial intelligence that could think faster than any living being. 70 Korthax warships simply ceased to exist. They did not explode dramatically. They did not have time to send distress signals. One moment they were there, and the next moment they were expanding clouds of atoms. Sub-Commander Kralvex watched from his destroyer as the space around him filled with death. His tactical display could not keep up with the destruction. Ships were disappearing faster than the computer could update the count. Return fire, he screamed. All ships, return fire. The Korthax fleet launched their weapons. Plasma cannons, torpedo spreads, Energy beams. Everything they had. The weapons crossed the void and struck the human shields. Nothing happened. The human ships did not even slow down. Their shields absorbed everything. The most powerful weapons in the Korthax arsenal were like rain hitting stone. The second human salvo launched. Another 100 Korthax ships died. In 90 seconds, the Korthax fleet had lost more than half its numbers. The humans had not moved. They remained in perfect formation, firing with mechanical precision. War Master Drukon stood frozen on his flagship bridge. This was not possible. His fleet was the finest in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never lost a major battle. "Sir!" his tactical officer shouted. "We have lost 170 ships. Shields are failing across. The fleet! We cannot damage them." Drukon grabbed the communications panel. "All ships retreat. Fall back to planetary orbit." The surviving Korthax ships turned and burned their engines at maximum power. They ran. For the first time in their military history, they ran. Captain Haiwan watched the enemy retreat. "Deploy gravity well generators." 3 human ships activated devices that distorted space itself. Suddenly, faster-than-light travel became impossible. The Korthax could not escape. They were trapped in the system. Haiwan opened a channel to all enemy ships. Her voice was cold and emotionless. "You invaded a defenseless world. You killed civilians. You will not leave this system. You will not surrender. You will simply die." She closed the channel and gave the order. "All ships, pursue and destroy. No survivors." What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The human fleet moved forward slowly, methodically. They selected targets with care. Each Korthax ship was disabled first, engines destroyed, weapons offline. Then they were finished off with single, precise shots. Sub-Commander Kralvex tried everything. He fired every weapon his ship had. He tried to run. He tried to hide in the debris field. Nothing worked. The humans tracked him with perfect accuracy. A human fighter appeared on his view screen. It was small, fast, and piloted by something that flew with inhuman precision. Lieutenant Jiho sat in that fighter, humming to himself as he lined up his shot. This was his 7th kill. He was hoping to reach 10 before the battle ended. Kralvex broadcast a message. "We surrender. Please, we surrender." The human response came instantly. "Surrender not accepted," Jiho fired. The destroyer's reactor went critical. Kralvex managed to reach an escape pod seconds before his ship exploded. He drifted through space, surrounded by wreckage. He was one of fewer than a dozen Korthax to survive. From his pod, he watched the humans finish their work. Every Korthax ship was destroyed. 300 warships reduced to debris in less than an hour. The human fleet had not taken a single casualty. Not one damaged ship. Not one scratch. Ambassador, Relthora watched the battle from her damaged command station. She had hoped for rescue. She had prayed for help. What she witnessed was something else entirely. The Korthax fleet, which had destroyed her entire civilization's defenses in an hour, was gone. Simply gone. The humans had killed them all without mercy, without hesitation. A message came through her console. It was from the human fleet. "This is Admiral Dae Jung of the United Terran Navy. The orbital space is secure. We are deploying ground forces to remove the remaining invaders from your planet. Stay in your shelters. Do not approach our forces. We are not here for you. We are here for them." Relthora tried to respond, but her voice would not work. She should feel relief. She should feel joy. Her people would be saved. But all she felt was terror. If the humans could do this to the Korthax fleet, what would they do to the ground forces? What would they do to her planet? What would they do to the galaxy? Commander Vesh Khan sat in his prison cell deep in the Korthax command center. He could hear explosions in the distance. The orbital bombardment had stopped hours ago. For a moment, he thought the Korthax had won. Then he heard his guards talking in panicked voices. Something had happened in orbit. Something bad. The entire fleet was gone. All of it. Veshkan did not understand. How could an entire fleet disappear? The Korthax had 300 warships. Who could possibly destroy them? His question was answered when he heard new sounds. Different explosions, closer, and something else. Something that made the Korthax guards afraid. The sound of something approaching, something unstoppable. War Master Drukan stood in his command center on the planet's surface, staring at his tactical displays. His fleet was gone. All of it. In 47 minutes, an unknown enemy had destroyed 300 of the finest warships in the galaxy. He had 50,000 troops on the ground. He had defensive positions. He had hostages. Surely that would be enough. His sensors detected incoming objects from orbit. Drop pods. Thousands of them. The humans were landing. Drukan activated his communications. All forces, prepare for ground combat. Show these humans that the Korthax do not fear anyone. But even as he gave the order, he felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. He felt doubt. Battle Sister Threxna commanded 200 Korthax soldiers at a defensive position outside the capital city. They had heavy weapons, armored vehicles, and force fields. They had held this position against Velrun resistance for weeks. She watched the human drop pods impact 3 kilometers away. Her scanners tracked the enemy as they emerged and began advancing. They are moving at 60 kilometers per hour, her sensor officer reported. Threxna checked the readings again. That is impossible. Infantry cannot move that fast. The readings are accurate, Battle Sister. Threxna gripped her weapon. All units prepare to fire. Target the enemy as soon as they are in range. 3 minutes later, she saw them. The humans were not just fast. They were enormous. Each soldier stood over 2 meters tall in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. They ran across the open ground without fear. Fire. Fire everything. The Korthax position erupted with weapons fire. Plasma bolts, explosive rounds, energy beams. Everything they had poured into the advancing humans. The humans did not even slow down. The weapons bounced off their shields. Their armor absorbed hits that should have killed them. They just kept coming. When the humans reached the defensive line, they did not stop to take cover. They simply crashed through it like a wave. Threxna saw one human grab a Korthax soldier and throw him 10 meters. She saw another human walk through automatic weapons fire and crush an armored vehicle with his bare hands. This was not combat. This was butchery. Threxna fought as well as she could. She was a trained warrior. She had won battles across a dozen worlds. But nothing had prepared her for this. The humans fought with cold efficiency. No wasted movements, no mercy, no emotion. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Every Korthax soldier was dead. Not one human had fallen. Across the planet, the same scene repeated. Human forces hit Korthax positions with overwhelming power, advanced weapons, superior armor, perfect coordination. The Korthax had never faced an enemy like this. Colonel Taeyang led his vanguard Marines through the battlefield. His body was more machine than flesh now. Cybernetic enhancements made him faster, stronger, and nearly impossible to kill. He had lost most of his original body in previous wars. Now he was a weapon walking in human shape. He received reports from across the combat zone. Everywhere human forces were winning. Korthax positions fell one after another. The enemy had numbers, but numbers meant nothing against superior technology and training. Taeyang opened a channel to Admiral Dae Jung. Ground forces have secured 70% of objectives. Estimated time to complete planetary liberation, 60 hours. Civilian casualties, minimal. Enemy casualties, total. Dae Jung's voice was calm. Proceed, Colonel. Show them why humanity was feared. Yes, sir. Taeyang ended the transmission and returned his attention to the battle. The Korthax were learning a lesson that many species had learned before them. Some enemies cannot be defeated. They can only be endured. Humanity was not one of those enemies. Humanity could not be endured, they could only be avoided. And the Korthax had failed to avoid them. War Master Drukan retreated to his final stronghold. The command center was built into a mountain, with walls thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment. He had 15,000 troops with him. He had automated defenses. He had supplies for months. Most importantly, he had hostages, 10,000 Velran civilians imprisoned in the lower levels. If the humans attacked, he would kill them all. He broadcast a message to the human fleet. This is War Master Drukon. I have 10,000 hostages. If you attack this facility, they will all die. You have 1 hour to withdraw from this system. The response came from Admiral Daejung himself. The old admiral's voice was colder than space itself. You have 10 minutes to release the hostages. After that, we stop differentiating between hostage takers and hostages. Drukon laughed. They were bluffing. They had to be. No military force would risk killing hostages. That was the entire point of taking hostages. He ordered 100 hostages brought to the surface and executed. The executions were broadcast for the humans to see. Then he waited for their response. The response was immediate. From orbit, human warships fired kinetic weapons. Not at the mountain itself, but at every defensive position around it. Every gun emplacement. Every anti-aircraft battery. Every bunker entrance. The weapons struck with surgical precision. In 30 seconds, the fortress went from impregnable to defenseless. The walls were intact. The hostages were safe. But every weapon that could protect the facility was destroyed. Drukon stared at his tactical displays in horror. How had they targeted so precisely? How had they known exactly where every defensive position was located? The answer came as human drop pods began landing around the mountain, not far away, where his defenses could have hit them. Right on top of the facility. They bypassed his remaining defenses entirely. Colonel Tae Yang emerged from his drop pod and surveyed the fortress. His tactical AI had already mapped the entire structure. He knew where every Korthak soldier was positioned. He knew where the hostages were held. He knew the fastest route to complete his mission. All teams proceed. Rules of engagement. Korthak soldiers are hostile. Everyone else is to be protected. Move. The human Marines placed breaching charges on reinforced doors. The explosions were precisely calibrated, strong enough to destroy the metal, but controlled enough not to harm anyone on the other side. They entered the fortress and began clearing it room by room. Commander Veshkan heard the explosions getting closer. His cell was deep in the fortress, far from the fighting, or so he thought. The sounds of combat were rhythmic, methodical. Not the chaos of battle, but the steady work of professionals. His cell door exploded inward. Veshkan closed his eyes, expecting death. When he opened them, he saw something that made no sense. A massive figure stood in the doorway, covered in armor that looked more like a machine than anything living. The face was partially visible through the helmet. Most of it was metal. Cybernetic implants covered what had once been organic tissue. Colonel Tae Yang looked at the Velran commander. His voice was surprisingly gentle. You are free. Stay here until the shooting stops. We will return for you. Then the human turned and walked back into the corridor. Veshkan heard weapons fire, screams, and then silence. The human was clearing the level, one room at a time. Civilian Nira huddled in a cell with 50 other Velrans. They had been prisoners for weeks. They had watched other prisoners taken away and never returned. When the explosion started, they thought the Korthaks were killing everyone. The cell door burst open. A human Marine entered, weapon ready. Then the Marine knelt down to the prisoner's eye level. Through the armor's speaker, a woman's voice spoke softly. You are safe now. Stay low, stay quiet. We will come back for you when it is clear. The Marine left and Nira heard her join the battle outside. The same gentle voice now shouted tactical commands. The same careful hands now fired weapons with deadly precision. Nira realized something terrifying about these humans. They could switch from protector to destroyer in an instant. They could be gentle with hostages and brutal with enemies. And they never confused the two. The Korthak soldiers fought desperately. They had trained for combat. They had fought on dozens of worlds, but nothing prepared them for fighting humans in close quarters. The humans used weapons that fired automatically. They threw grenades that found targets on their own. They wore armor that their heaviest weapons could not penetrate. And they moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared one mind. Every room the humans entered became a killing ground. Every corridor they advanced through became a graveyard. The Korthaks fought with honor and courage. It made no difference. War Master Drukon stood in his command center watching his forces die on the monitors. Level by level, room by room, the humans were clearing his fortress. His elite guards prepared for a final stand. The command center doors exploded. Smoke filled the room. When it cleared, a single human stood in the doorway. Colonel Tae Yang walked into the room alone. He was not carrying a weapon. He did not need one. Drukon was a warrior. He had spent his entire life fighting. He would not die cowering. He drew his ceremonial blade and charged. Tae Yang caught the blade with his cybernetic hand. The metal crumpled. He looked at Drukon with eyes that showed no anger, no hatred, nothing but cold efficiency. You hurt civilians. That was your mistake. 3 seconds later, War Master Drukon was dead. The legendary conqueror who had won battles across a dozen systems died on his knees in his own command center. The battle for the fortress took 4 hours. 15,000 Korthax soldiers were eliminated. 10,000 hostages were freed alive and unharmed. Human casualties, 23 wounded, none dead. Across Veshera Prime, similar operations concluded. The human ground forces had swept the entire planet in 72 hours. 50,000 Korthax troops neutralized. Millions of Velran civilians saved. The Velran population emerged from hiding to find their world changed. The Korthax were gone. The humans were everywhere. Ambassador Relthora walked through the capital city. Human soldiers directed traffic. Human medical teams treated the wounded. Human engineers repaired damaged buildings with machines that worked faster than anything she had ever seen. She found Admiral Daejung standing in the central plaza, looking at the destruction. He was an old man, she realized. His face was lined with age and exhaustion. He looked like he had been fighting for a very long time. "Admiral," she said quietly. He turned to her. "Ambassador Relthora, your distress signal has been answered. You saved us. We did what was necessary." Relthora hesitated. "What happens now? Will you stay?" Daejung was silent for a moment. "We will remain until your civilization is stable. Then we will leave. We are not conquerors, Ambassador. We are not interested in ruling your world. Then what are you interested in?" The old admiral looked at her with tired eyes. "Making sure what happened to you never happens again. To anyone." Civilian Nira watched human soldiers escort freed prisoners to medical centers. One of the soldiers saw her and approached. The massive armored figure knelt down. "Are you hurt?" The voice was gentle, concerned. Nira shook her head. "I saw you. I saw you fighting. You killed them all." The soldier was quiet for a moment. "We did. They hurt innocent people. That is something we cannot allow." "Are you going to hurt us?" "No, we came to help you. That is all we want to do." The soldier stood and walked away. Nira watched the human go. She believed the words. But she also remembered the violence. These humans could be saviors and monsters, sometimes both at the same time. Commander Veshkan met with other surviving Velran military officers. They gathered in a building guarded by human soldiers. The contrast was painful. The Velrans had failed to protect their world. The humans had saved it in 3 days. Captain Haiwan entered the room. The human officer was smaller than most of her soldiers, but she carried herself with absolute authority. "Commander Veshkan," she said, "we need to discuss rebuilding your defense forces." Veshkan felt shame burning in his chest. "We failed. Our fleet was destroyed. Our army could not fight. You had to save us." Haiwan's expression softened slightly. "Your people are not warriors. That is not a weakness. That is who you are. But you need to be able to defend yourselves. We will help you build that capability." "Why? Why help us?" "Because someone should have helped us 3,000 years ago. Instead, they locked us away. We will not make that mistake with others." 6 days after the liberation began, the last Korthax soldier was found and neutralized. Veshera Prime was free. The human fleet began transitioning from combat operations to humanitarian support. But across the galaxy, word was spreading. A distress signal had been answered. Not by the Council, not by any established power, but by something new, something terrifying. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sub-Commander Kralvex drifted in his escape pod for 2 days before a merchant ship found him. He was the highest-ranking Korthax officer to survive. When he told his story, nobody believed him at first. 300 warships destroyed in less than an hour. 50,000 ground troops eliminated in 3 days. An unknown species that fought with technology decades beyond anything the galaxy possessed. But the evidence was undeniable. The Korthax invasion fleet was gone. All of it, every ship reduced to wreckage. Every soldier dead or captured, and the species responsible called themselves humans. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Within days, every major civilization knew. The quarantine zone had been breached. Humanity had returned. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. High Counselor Vexthar stood before hundreds of representatives from across known space. The chamber was filled with fear and confusion. The reports are confirmed, Vexthar said. Humanity has responded to the Velran distress signal. They destroyed the Korthax invasion force completely. They are currently occupying Veshura Prime. A Drylan representative stood. How is this possible? The quarantine was absolute. How did they break through? They did not break through. They simply ignored it. Our barrier technology could not stop them. Another voice called out. We must reinforce the quarantine. Contain them before they spread. Vexthar raised his hand for silence. You do not understand. We cannot contain them. We never could. The quarantine was never about keeping them imprisoned. It was about keeping them away from us. The chamber went silent. A younger counselor spoke hesitantly. Explain. Vexthar took a deep breath. 3,000 years ago, we discovered humanity. They were young, violent, and engaged in civil wars that covered their entire solar system. We studied them. We watched them fight, and we became terrified. He activated a holographic display showing ancient records, images of human battles, weapons that could sterilize planets, soldiers who kept fighting even when defeat was certain. They were not quarantined because they were backward. They were quarantined because they were too dangerous. We hoped that given time they would become peaceful. We were wrong. They simply became better at war. Observer Minjai arrived at Veshura Prime 2 weeks after the liberation. He had been sent by the Council to assess the situation. What he found both reassured and terrified him. The humans were helping. Medical teams treated wounded Velrans. Engineering crews repaired damaged infrastructure. Agricultural specialists helped restore food production. They were efficient, professional, and seemed genuinely interested in helping the Velran people recover. But Minjai also saw the military presence. Human warships in orbit, each powerful enough to destroy a planet. Marines in powered armor conducting security patrols. Automated defense systems that tracked every movement with perfect accuracy. He requested a meeting with Admiral Dae Jung. The old human received him in a temporary command center. Observer Minjai, Dae Jung said, I have been expecting you. The Council wants to know our intentions. Yes, Admiral. The galaxy isn't concerned. Concerned that we will conquer them, or concerned that we will stop them from conquering others. Minjai paused. The question was more insightful than he expected. Both, perhaps, Dae Jung nodded. We have no interest in conquest. We have no interest in ruling other species. But we will not tolerate species that prey on the defenseless. The Korthax learned this lesson. Others will learn it too. You speak as if you have authority over the entire galaxy. No. We speak as if we have the power to enforce basic decency. There is a difference. Dr. Bora met privately with Ambassador Relthora. The Velran diplomat had many questions about humanity. Bora tried to answer honestly. Why were you quarantined? Relthora asked. Bora sighed. Because the galaxy was afraid of us. When they first found us, we were fighting each other. We had weapons that terrified them. We had a culture that refused to surrender even when losing. They decided it was safer to lock us away. Were they wrong? I do not know. We spent 3,000 years alone. We could have destroyed ourselves. Instead, we unified. We built fleets. We perfected weapons. But we also grew lonely. When we heard your distress call, we heard ourselves crying for help 3,000 years ago. Nobody came for us. We decided we would not make that same mistake. Relthora was quiet for a moment. Your people saved us. But your power frightens us. What happens if we refuse your friendship? Bora met her eyes. Nothing. We will leave when you ask us to. We will respect your wishes. But understand this, the galaxy is not a safe place. There are many species like the Korthax. If you need help again, we will come, whether you are our friend or not. In the Korthax Empire, the news of the disaster sent shockwaves through the government. The Supreme Council demanded answers. Sub-Commander Kralvex was brought before them. He told them everything. The speed of the destruction, the superiority of human weapons, the cold efficiency of their soldiers. When he finished, the council sat in stunned silence. A military commander spoke. We must retaliate, gather our fleets, show these humans that the Korthax Empire does not accept defeat. Kralvik shook his head. You do not understand. They are not invincible. But they might as well be. Their weapons are generations ahead of ours. Their soldiers are enhanced beyond natural limits. If we attack them, we will lose. The only question is whether we lose one fleet or lose our entire civilization. You suggest we do nothing? I suggest we choose peace. For the first time in our history, we have encountered a species we cannot defeat. We must adapt. The debate lasted for hours. Eventually, pragmatism won. The Korthax Empire, which had never suffered a military defeat, officially declared they had no quarrel with humanity. It was the closest thing to surrender their proud species could manage. 6 months after the liberation, Admiral Daejung announced that the human fleet would be withdrawing from Veshera Prime. The Velran government was stable. The infrastructure was repaired. Human protection was no longer necessary. Commander Veshkan, now leading the rebuilt Velran Defense Forces, met with the Admiral one final time. Will you return if we are threatened again? Veshkan asked. Daejung smiled slightly. Send the signal. We will come. Before the fleet left, Captain HFY installed a communications beacon in orbit. It was linked directly to human space, a way for the Velrans to call for help instantly. But it was also something else, a warning to anyone who might threaten this world. Humanity was watching. Across the galaxy, dozens of species rushed to establish contact with humanity. Some wanted alliances, some wanted trade agreements. Some simply wanted reassurance that humans would not turn their weapons on them. Dr. Bora and her diplomatic teams were overwhelmed with requests. Humanity had gone from isolated and forgotten to the most sought-after power in the galaxy in a matter of weeks. But not everyone was pleased. Some species, those who had built their power on conquest and intimidation, saw humanity as a threat to their way of life. Quiet military buildups began. Paranoia spread. Observer Minjai returned to the Galactic Council with his report. He spoke before the full assembly. Humanity cannot be defeated militarily, not by any single power, possibly not by any coalition. Their technology surpasses ours by decades. Their willingness to use overwhelming force is absolute, but they are not conquerors. They have no interest in ruling us. He paused. They are, however, very interested in stopping conquest. Any species that preys on the weak will face them. And they do not lose. And what do you recommend? Someone asked. We recognize them as a sovereign power. We invite them to join the council. We accept that the galaxy has changed. The age of unchallenged aggression is over. 3 months later, another distress signal was detected. A species called the Sereth was being invaded by slavers. The Valan hegemony, a brutal empire known for taking entire populations as property. The Galactic Council debated what to do. Before they could decide, humanity responded. Captain HFY led a human battle group to the Sereth system. The Valan fleet outnumbered them 20-1. They chose to fight. 23 minutes later, the Valan fleet was destroyed. Ground forces deployed. 72 hours later, the Serath homeworld was liberated. The pattern repeated. The galaxy watched in horror and awe. High Counselor Vexthar made a decision. Humanity would receive a formal invitation to join the Galactic Council. It was an invitation they could not refuse to give. Humanity did not need their permission for anything. But perhaps if they were part of the system, they could be influenced, guided, controlled. Deep down, Vexthar knew it was a foolish hope. Humanity was not controllable. They were a force of nature. The galaxy would have to adapt to them, not the other way around. The invitation was sent. Humanity accepted, and the galaxy held its breath, wondering what came next. Admiral Daejung stood on the bridge of the Silent Hammer, preparing to address the Galactic Council for the first time in 3,000 years. Every species in known space would hear his words. Every government would analyze them. Every military would assess the threat. Dr. Bora stood beside him. Are you certain about this message? It is direct. The galaxy needs to understand who we are. Gentle words will not accomplish that. They will fear us. Good. Fear prevents mistakes. The Korthax were not afraid. Look what happened to them. Daejung activated the transmission. His voice was broadcast across every known frequency, translated into every language, reaching every corner of the galaxy. This is Admiral Daejung of the United Terran Navy, speaking on behalf of humanity. We have been isolated from the galactic community for 3,000 years. That isolation has ended. We are here. We are listening. And we are acting. He paused, letting the words settle. We offer friendship to those who value peace. We offer trade to those who seek prosperity. We offer protection to those who cannot protect themselves. And we offer absolute destruction to those who prey upon the defenseless. You have been warned. Choose wisely. The message ended. Across the galaxy, governments went into emergency sessions. Military commanders reviewed their strategic plans. Aggressive species suddenly discovered an interest in peaceful negotiations. Within days, 3 separate conflicts ended. Species that had been at war for years suddenly found diplomatic solutions, not because they had become wise, but because they were afraid that humanity might notice. Pirates who had terrorized trade routes for decades simply disappeared. Slavers released their captives and went legitimate. Even minor border skirmishes stopped. The entire galaxy had become more peaceful overnight, not through wisdom, through fear. High Counselor Vexthar traveled to Earth to formally invite humanity to join the Galactic Council. It was the first time any council representative had visited the Sol system in 3,000 years. What he saw shocked him. Earth was beautiful, but it was also heavily defended. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons. The moon had been converted into a military shipyard. Mars hosted training facilities for millions of soldiers. Humanity had not just survived their isolation. They had militarized to a degree that terrified him. Every human colony was a fortress. Every civilian ship could be converted to military use. The entire species lived in a state of permanent readiness. Dai Jung met him in a conference room overlooking Earth. The old admiral looked tired. "Counselor Vexthar, you have an invitation for us." "Yes. The council would like humanity to join as full members. You would have representation, a voice in galactic affairs. And in return, you would agree to follow council protocols, respect established boundaries, coordinate military actions through proper channels." Daejung smiled without humor. "You want us to ask permission before saving people. We want to prevent chaos. The galaxy has rules. Your rules allowed the Velrans to die. Your rules allowed the Korthax to conquer unopposed. Your rules are designed to maintain power structures, not protect innocent people." Vexthar was silent. Everything Daejung said was true. "We will join your council," Daejung continued, "not because we need your permission, but because cooperation benefits everyone. However, understand this. We will never ask permission to defend the defenseless. If someone sends a distress signal, we will respond. Your approval is not required." 2 months later, Admiral Daejung addressed the Galactic Council in person. It was the first time a human had entered their chambers in millennia. The assembled representatives watched him with a mixture of fear and fascination. 3,000. Years ago you isolated us because you feared what we were. Today you invite us back because you fear what we have become. We accept your invitation, but not because we need you, because we believe in cooperation over domination. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from hundreds of species. "We will honor your laws where they do not conflict with our principles. We will respect your sovereignty where you do not threaten the innocent. But understand this clearly. The age of unchallenged conquest is over. Predators who feast on the weak will face us, and we do not lose." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, representatives began to applaud, not because they loved humanity, but because they understood the new reality. The galaxy had changed. Forever. Ambassador Relthora visited Earth 6 months after the liberation. She walked through human cities, saw their culture, met their people. She attended concerts and visited museums. She tasted their food and learned their history. What surprised her most was how normal they seemed. They laughed, they loved, they cared for their families. They were not monsters. They were just people. Dr. Bora met her in a park. They walked together, watching human children play. "I do not understand," Relthora said. "Your people are kind, compassionate, but your military is terrifying. How can both be true?" Bora smiled sadly. Because we remember being alone. We remember calling for help and receiving nothing. We remember fighting only ourselves for 3,000 years. We learned to be strong because no one would protect us. But we also learned empathy. We know what it feels like to be abandoned. So you help others because you were not helped? Yes. When we heard your distress call, we heard our own voice from long ago. We could not ignore it. We will never ignore it. Relthora watched the children play. Your power frightens the galaxy. I know, but weakness would not save anyone, so we chose strength. We just hope we can use it wisely. Sub-Commander Kralvex was interviewed by a galactic news network. The broadcast reached billions. He was asked about humanity. What should other species know about humans, the interviewer asked. Kralvex looked directly into the camera. They are not invincible, but they might as well be. I watched them destroy my entire fleet in less than an hour. I watched them liberate a planet in 3 days. They fight with technology and tactics that we cannot match, but that is not what makes them dangerous. Then what does? They can switch from protector to destroyer instantly. They saved civilians while killing every soldier. They have perfect control over their violence. That precision, that discipline, is what makes them unstoppable. If you value peace, befriend them. If you value conquest, fear them. And if you harm the innocent, pray. Because humanity has become the executioner of this galaxy. He paused. I have seen what they can do. I hope you never do. The interview went viral. Across the galaxy, aggressive species quietly changed their policies. The era of easy conquest was over. Lieutenant Jiho sat in his fighter, patrolling the edge of human space. His sensors detected a weak signal, a distress call. He enhanced it, translated it. Another species under attack, another cry for help. He forwarded the signal to command and waited. The response came quickly. Admiral Daejung reviewed the distress call. Another invasion. Another species facing extinction. Another chance to do what the galaxy had failed to do for humanity. He looked at his bridge crew. Prepare the fleet. We are responding. Captain Haiwan smiled slightly. Which battle group, sir? All of them. This one sounds serious. Across human space, fleets mobilized, thousands of warships, millions of soldiers, all moving toward one purpose. Someone had called for help. Humanity would answer. The galaxy watched, some with hope, some with fear. All with the understanding that something fundamental had changed. For thousands of years, the strong had preyed on the weak. The galaxy had accepted this as natural, inevitable, the way things were. But now there was humanity, and humanity had decided that some things were not acceptable. Conquest was not acceptable. Slavery was not acceptable. Genocide was not acceptable. The galaxy could accept this new reality, or it could fight it. But fighting humanity had only one outcome. Colonel Tae Young stood in a drop bay, preparing for deployment. Around him, his Marines checked their weapons and armor. They had trained for this. They were ready. A young Marine approached him nervously. Colonel, is it true that we never lose? Tae Yang looked at the soldier. We have superior technology, superior training, superior tactics. But that is not why we win. Then why? Because we remember what it feels like to be helpless. We remember calling for help and receiving nothing. We fight so others never feel that way. That gives us purpose, and purpose makes us unstoppable. The human fleet jumped to faster than light travel. They crossed the galaxy in days. They arrived at a system under siege. They sent their message to all frequencies. This is the United Terran Navy. Your distress call has been received. Comply or die. The invaders chose to fight. They always did it first. They never learned fast enough. The pattern repeated. Orbital battle, ground liberation, humanitarian aid. Then departure, leaving behind a beacon, a promise of protection, a warning to predators. Somewhere in the galaxy, another species watched the news. They had been planning an invasion. They had fleets ready. They had conquest in their hearts. They watched humanity destroy another aggressor in minutes. They watched human forces save millions of civilians. They watched the pattern, and they quietly canceled their invasion plans. The galaxy had changed. The age of unchallenged aggression was over. The strong could no longer prey on the weak without consequence, because somewhere in the darkness humanity was listening, watching, waiting, ready to answer the next distress call. And the galaxy knew one thing with absolute certainty. When humanity arrived, the monsters learned to fear.